How tonal differences affect communication in Mandarin and English. In all languages, what tone you use can affect how your words are received and interpreted. For example, if I said, "What are you doing?" versus "What are you doing?" you might interpret these sentences very differently. The words themselves didn't change meaning, but one expresses curiosity while the other seems more accusatory or angry. This actually isn't the case for all languages, however. In tonal languages, like Mandarin, your tone actually changes the meaning of your word or sentence. Rising and falling intonations aren't used to indicate emotion, but instead indicate the literal meaning of your words. The difference in how tones are used in English and Mandarin can cause communication issues when not fully understood. So, when speaking in either language, it's important to understand how your tone can intentionally or unintentionally change the meaning of a sentence. Now, Mandarin is a tonal language. This means that when speaking, your tone and pitch can determine the meaning of a word or phrase without changing the actual vowels and consonants. Mandarin uses four main tones: high and level, rising, rising, and falling. Each of these tones is written differently and can vastly change the meaning of a sentence when used. So the first tone, or tone 1, as it's called in Mandarin, is high-pitched, level, and long. When written in pinyin, which is the phonetic writing system for Mandarin, tone 1 is indicated by a straight line over the vowel. And before I get into doing any examples of pronunciation, I just want to put a disclaimer out there that my pronunciation is not perfect, as I've only been practicing for a few weeks. But with that being said, some examples of how this tone would sound with these vowels would be, like with the A would be ah, with the O, eh, e, and oo. So tone 2 is the rising tone, and as the name would imply, it's spoken by raising the pitch of your voice. This tone is indicated by an ascending accent over a vowel, and this would sound like ah, o, eh, e, and oo. Tone 3 is the falling rising tone and is widely considered the hardest for English speakers to master and perfect. This tone starts in the mid-range, dips low, and then rises back up. And a curved line is used to indicate this in pinyin. So this would sound like o, eh, e, and oo. The last tone is tone 4, the falling tone. This is the shortest tone and it is used with a descending pitch. It is indicated by a descending accent over a vowel. So this would be o, I, e, and oo. All four tones are extremely common in Mandarin, and each can change the meaning of a word. Not all words have four different meanings, one for each tone, but many do have multiple meanings. For example, the word ma has four meanings depending on which tone is used. So the first tone would be ma, and it would mean mother. The second tone, ma, means hemp. The third, ma, means horse. And the fourth, ma, means to scold. Now, these pronunciations may not have sounded all that different, but clearly they can change the meaning of a sentence drastically. This is where context would usually come in. And because so many words have multiple meanings, context is extremely important when speaking Mandarin. During fast conversation, tone may not be clearly articulated, which may cause some confusion on what words mean. Therefore, context is used a lot to confirm the meaning of a word in a sentence. Using our example from earlier, the sentence, "I called my mom," using ma with the first tone, would make a lot more sense than the sentence, "I called my horse," which would be using ma with the third tone. So even if your tone wasn't perfectly articulated, based on the context, you could likely still figure out the meaning of a sentence. In contrast to how tone is used in Mandarin, when speaking in English, tone does not change the actual meaning of words. Tone is used to convey emotions and add subtext. For example, going back to our very first sentence, "What are you doing?" Depending on tone, the emotion and subtext change. If you say, "What are you doing?" using a rising tone, it comes across as a normal question and little subtext is added. With the descending tone, however, "What are you doing?" it comes across much more accusatory and implies the person you are speaking to is doing something wrong. So tone does add something to English conversation, but it doesn't actually change what the words themselves mean. The closest thing that English has to how tones change words in Mandarin is something called a heteronym. So according to Cambridge Dictionary, a heteronym refers to one of two or more words that have the same spelling but different pronunciations and meanings. Some examples of this would be bass and bass, referring to the instrument and fish respectively, and tear and tear, meaning to rip or the liquid that you cry. And although these words change based more on pronunciation than actual tone, they're still the closest English equivalent to how tone works in Mandarin. Because these two languages use tone in different ways, this can cause communication issues between native English and native Mandarin speakers. An article written by Babbel, a language learning tool, actually cites Mandarin as the hardest language for English speakers to learn due to its complex writing system and multiple tones. When native English speakers are learning Mandarin, a common issue occurs when descending tone is used. Because a short, sharp descending intonation often indicates anger or frustration in English, English speakers tend to apply the same meaning to Mandarin. As we learned previously, the falling tone doesn't mean anger, it simply indicates what a word means. When this communication error occurs, it can cause unnecessary tension to conversations and hinder communication. Another common issue is that English speakers often don't focus on correct tones when speaking Mandarin. When learning new languages, English speakers tend to focus on grammar and vocabulary, and tone can fall by the wayside. When tones aren't pronounced correctly, it can change the meaning of a word, which would then cause confusion. In order to reduce the chance of miscommunication through tone, it's important to use context clues when having conversations. If you're unsure of how to interpret something, look at the other things that have been said or ask the person you're speaking to. The worst thing you can do is assume malice where there is none, so it's important to make sure that you're using critical thinking when determining what a tone means. So English and Mandarin use tones in different ways. It's important to keep that in mind when having a conversation in either language. It's best to give the benefit of the doubt when interpreting tone, and using context to help you understand the true intention behind sentences can be helpful. Understanding how tone influences different languages can save you from a lot of misunderstandings and will make you a more effective and thoughtful communicator. Thank you so much.